So welcome back. Hopefully you had some interesting conversations and got to meet some new coaches along the way as well. I would like to ask if you go into the chat box and type in anything that might have been.
This is about like lopsided games and how to coach through them.
Rob, can you mute all, please? Thank you. So if you could take a moment and go into the chat box and discuss anything that was maybe a standout comment or discussion within your individual breakout rooms, anything that everybody agreed on, or if there's anything that maybe you didn't all see eye to eye on. So feel free to take a moment and type it into the chat box.
Some of the responses coming in are, it's harder to coach a lopsided game when your team is the stronger one.
For sure. Anything else?
Yeah, should you or should you not remove a player?
Interesting. Was that a common thing or a discussion within the group? And that's out to the coach that typed that in.
That was a discussion within the group, Tommy.
Okay.
No, because some people thought that it was disrespectful to the other team, and some people thought that if you did it discreetly, the other team wouldn't even know, and it was a easy way to balance things out without going to extremes.
And it can be, how do you do it without almost seeming condescending while you're doing it? Ian, can you go to the next slide? So a few things that pop up, and Ian, click them all in, please. Some of the things that you might have to deal with as a coach, whether you're on the winning side or the losing side, is many of these. I'm sure some of these might have been in your discussions, but this is definitely not a finite list. Hopefully we can continue to add more to it, because it's important that we understand why it happens so that we can start taking steps to make sure that we are handling it a little bit more efficiently, a little bit more effectively as coaches.
Tommy, can I just throw in one other one for consideration, which mostly applies to the high school ages, which is where I do most of my division directing in Bays. And that has a lot to do with which kids show up. These high school age teams, both girls and boys, they've got lots of different commitments, and sometimes they're there for a game and sometimes they're not. But if one team has all their players there and the other team is missing a few, at that level, it really does make a big difference and much more of a challenge to the coach as far as trying to control a potentially lopsided game.
Well, I think you're right on the mark with that. Whether or not they're having a sleepover the night before, who's on the roster, who actually shows, trying to get big rosters, everybody playing time. So it's actually, I'm glad you're on, because there's a thing that we're going to discuss with the administrative side of things. And what can the administrators do? What do they try to do? And if you have some thoughts on what they possibly can do to make the environment even better. So,
well,
in the next.
I know, well, in Bays, what we do is we do have a guideline as far as what constitutes a lopsided score. And it's built into our online scoring system. If a score is recorded at, I think it's a 6-goal differential or higher, automatically that sends out a message to the division director and the president of the club reporting what happened, and could you please speak with the coach and see what you can do about it. As far as what goes on after that point, it really varies, and we've got some division directors that are very good at it, and there are others that aren't. And we do post things on our website with suggestions on what to do with a lopsided game. One of the strongest ones that I've used over the years is once you recognize what you've got, if you're on the strong end, treat this like a training session. It's no more a game. You don't want to tell the kids don't score. You don't want to tell the kids shoot wide. You maybe do want to tell the kids pass the ball around, work on back passing, things like that. But you're not trying to have them do bad habits that are going to create problems down the road. You still want to try to do things that are positive. And if you can treat it like a training session and have them work on a few specified skills, they can look like they're hustling just as hard as any other competitive game.
Well,
But
Steve,
without trying to
you're jumping ahead of it a little bit.
Sorry.
Because a lot of that stuff, hopefully we're gonna address. So if we think about it, or who are the people that are involved? And if we look at a lopsided game, what we could do before the game, what we could do during the game, and possibly what we could do after the game. And the league administrators, a lot of their role comes in during the game. And you have referees that have to make sure that they're involved in it as well. You have the parents have a role, and we'll go on to these each one. Even the players, what's their level of understanding? And most of the brunt does go to the coaches. So if we think about, if we start with that, and the league administrators are trying to go with the knowledge that they have, and they try to put in some guidelines, as Steve, as you had mentioned, about just being aware of it, knowing that it's going to happen. You can't make the perfect league. So the league administrators can try to do something ahead of time to see if they could curb it a little bit, or even give some guidelines or suggestions for what you might want to do. Sometimes it's not just as easy as let's get 50 passes before we score, or let's try to do this challenge or that challenge, because that sometimes can be, as mentioned before, almost condescending to the players as well. So what can you do? And it kind of goes back to the questions we asked at the beginning with the coaches. At what point do you realize that that's actually something that's happening? So what can we do about it? The next one is the referees. And the referees have to continue to do, as far as keeping the safety of the game, respecting the players, be somewhat sympathetic, but they still have to ref the game, which they do. They do a great job, but it's not an easy job, for an easy task for them, because they're not trying to step on toes, but talking to the players, talking to the coaches, helping them wrap their head around what's happening, and just helping them make the most out of it. So the referees do have a role in just making sure that the children, when they do leave the field, everybody's leaving in a safe way so that they could come back and do this again, because ultimately there will be another game. Next one we think about is the parents, and what can the parents do? Whether you're on the winning side or the losing side, what can you do to make sure that you're recognizing the effort of the players? If you're on the losing side, recognize what they're trying to do, not necessarily what they're successful doing, but also provide encouragement. If you're on the winning team, because it's not a fun place to really be in. It's not always a fun game to watch, but making sure you're understanding that you are encouraging their effort and thinking about, okay, what happens next? Even if you're on the winning team, where do we go from here? Do we get that false sense of we're awesome because we beat up a team? Or do we look at this and said, okay, things happen to go really well, but yes, we still have some things to work on. And from the parents, it's important that we could help the kids process that information by remaining positive and letting them know that you're proud of them for playing the game and being smart about it. And Ian, there's one more click on this one. And actually trying to normalize the environment that they're in. You know, this is hopefully not something that happens all the time, but something that we could take a look at and says, yes, this does happen. And it's not something we could just say, let's eliminate it. Let's say find out a way that it's never going to happen. We just have to learn a way to process it. So I'm going to pause there for a second. And if there's any thoughts or comments that you want to add into the chat box about what we've addressed so far as how the parents can process this, or the administrators, what are your thoughts on it, or what are your experiences? Feel free to type something into the chat box just to make sure we're going in a direction that's more meaningful to you.
Hey, Tommy, when you talk about administrators, do you mean putting a rule into place for lopsided games, or doing something about sandbagging in divisions? Or what do you mean by administrators are able to fix the process?
Well, they're not able to fix the process, but they try to do it before the team step out on the field. They try to put guidelines and standards to make sure coaches are aware of, look, sometimes you're going to be in a league that you're just better than the other teams. And it's not helpful or enjoyable just to unload on that team. So I don't know if you want to call it Ian had made the comment about a slaughter rule, or just some guidelines to make sure coaches are not waiting till, or the administrators are trying to encourage the coaches not to wait till the game gets to a point that you really can't reel it back.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
Tommy,
Danny,
I saw a comment there about placement, and as you know too, just in fall travel, it's really hard. I mean, it's hard because the competition committee of the leagues, they just don't have the level of intelligence, right? I mean, and they're basing a lot of it off the success of the previous year. So you'll have, I even saw it this year. I mean, you'll have MTOC teams, they'll just immediately get moved up from Division 2 to Division 1, and they got absolutely annihilated because they graduated everybody off, right? It's a crapshoot, as you know, in the fall. In the spring, ideally, if everybody's doing it well, then you don't. But you're just gonna have to endure a lot of these in the fall. You say you don't want to see a lot of them, but unfortunately, you see too many of them in the fall. And I don't know necessarily how you solve it, because it's not a perfect science, as you know.
Oh, and you're absolutely right. Sometimes when you get new rosters, certain kids move up, certain kids move out. It may not be the same team based on their record,
That's right.
but all you can do is make sure, for the administrators, just trying to raise awareness. And from the parent standpoint, making sure that they are talking to their children about what's actually helping them process it. It's a weird emotion that starts going through. Children can read the parents' body language. They read the comments. They know what's going on. And hopefully we're just trying to make sure it doesn't go too far in the other direction. They kind of, if it happens, great, but hopefully we can work towards it not happening often. Thanks for that, Mark. Jamie, any other comments?
Yeah, there's a couple. These are good messages to focus on with parents in a meeting at the start of the season, so they know how we will handle as coaches and support. A tough position, but referees could help branch both team coaches when lopsided game is identified and determine what can be done. Add/remove a player on the field, etc. Team placing divisions also need more emphasis during preseason. Some teams don't stop during off season. Some players haven't touched the ball.
And I think that connects to what Mark was saying before about that fall timeframe, when kids are moving up, kids are moving in a different division, and it's kind of just wrapping their head around where they are now.
And
So,
then,
go ahead.
That I see common one regarding referees. To say a referee has responsibility during the game indicates they have something to do with the cause. And then another comment would be, I would like to encourage referees to quietly talk to coaches if they're playing down, etc., instead of making a big deal out of it.
I think that's a really interesting point about just have those quiet conversations when you get into an earshot to help them try to manage through it, try to work their way through it. But it is something, as we hopefully one of the takeaways we get from this is that it's not just a coach or a league administrator or a parent or a coach or a player. It's really something that we all have to work together to make sure that we're processing it better. So the next one we have is we start thinking about the players. And I'm not sure how many of you, and you could give me a smile or a thumbs up, and, as a player, have you been in a situation like this? If you could, in any sport, it doesn't just have to be soccer. And we think about all the emotions, all the feelings that might be going on in the player's head. Usually the harder emotions come when you're on the downside of it. But even on the winning side of it, it is something that it may not be enjoyable. It could be frustrating because now you don't necessarily get to play the game the way you wanted to. It could become angry. You know, you think about, okay, what do I actually want to achieve today? What are some goals that I could come across as a player? So as we take all this into play, and more so with the younger children, but it does happen with the older ones, is how do you process these emotions? How do you process these feelings? And what we can do as the adults to help them through that. If it's an experienced player or a little bit older, there's, for those of you who have taken a coaching education course, there's something that's called key qualities of a player. And the first key quality is learning to read and understand the game. What's happening in the game right now? We're up 5-0 or so. What needs to happen next? What do I need to do? Because now I'm thinking as hopefully helping them learn to think as a player. What's the game demanding of me now versus I'm down by a goal. What can I, or I'm down by 5 goals. Okay, what can I physically do to try to reel this back in? There are limitations. There's not much you can, there's not always a whole lot you can do as far as changing the score. But hopefully on the next slide, as we go into the coaches, we start thinking about what can the coaches do as they step in and what can the coaches do as they get involved. So I want to get us into, on this one, get us into another breakout room for about 7 or 8 minutes. And if you are in an even number room, I want you to talk about how you deal with it if you are the winning coach in a blowout. And if you're in an odd number room, talk about how you deal with it if you are on the losing side of a situation like this. So even numbered rooms, talk about if you're the winning coach, what do you do in these situations? And odd number rooms, talk about if you were on the losing side and what are some things that you've done or you can do to maintain the integrity of the game and make the most out of what could be a tough situation. Jamie, can you?
Are you talking during the game or after the game? Or
as a
both?
whole, it's your room, your discussion. How do you deal with it? And if you want to, before, during, after, hopefully that comes into your discussions as well. But what can you do to make these things, make it so it's a better environment for all? Are they still coming in? So welcome back. And again, I'm going to ask you to use a chat box to see if there was anything interesting conversations from your room. And while you're typing that in, I'm going to go back to a question we had asked before about from a player standpoint. Alex Ivanov, if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself and talk to everybody about your first game and what that was like.
People are still coming in, Tommy, so you might want to just repeat what you want for the chat box. You're muted.
Tommy, you're muted.
There we go. Okay, so in the chat box, if you could write in anything of interest that you had in your room or any of the discussions that you had, that how you deal with it as a coach, whether you're on the winning side or the losing side. And while we're typing things in, I was going to ask if you're willing to, Alex Ivanov, if you wouldn't mind sharing what you had chatted in before about your first soccer match you ever played. It was in the 9th grade, 1973. and you lost 23-0, and you still love playing and losing that bad, made me want to be better. So do you want to share a little bit more about that experience?
Well, I will. We had a very interesting group. Soccer was very new to our school at that point, and they didn't have anybody to coach it that knew anything about soccer. We had a coach that coached out of a book. And, we were all there because we wanted to, try something new. And, we knew we weren't a great team, and we knew, but we were on the steep side of the learning curve. And so we went out to our first match, and we lost 23-0. And it bothered us, losing 23-0, but it didn't bother us that we lost. It just showed us how far we had to go. And we had coaches and parents that supported us in that. And, by the time we were seniors, we were making, the tournament. So it just was just a matter of, getting our act together and learning how to play. And, the emphasis was placed on our development at that level. We were a freshman team. It was all about development. The coach wasn't going to get fired if we lost every game. We weren't going to get cut if we lost every game. It just gave us an opportunity to get better. And 23-0 was an eye opener for us, because we thought we weren't good, but we didn't think we were that not good. And, everybody I played with on that team, there's a bunch of us that still get together, and we still remember that and actually laugh about it. It was like, well, yep, that was an eye opener. So a lot of that depends on the players and the coaches, and, your emotional maturity for playing at that level.
Sure. Thanks for sharing that. It's a humbling experience.
Well, I went on to play some semi-pro ball, so I just, I always look back to that point and said, well, that gave me the good swift kick in the butt that got me moving faster.
Sometimes that's what it takes. But at the same point, sometimes it could turn you away from it as well. So the fact that the people that you played with are still involved, that's kind of cool that they all stuck it out and kept going with it. And it sounds like they enjoyed their soccer careers.
I think the coaches and parents set the right expectations for us going in, and it made it easier. And that's part of what we try to do now, because I get the kids first time 11v11 in Lincoln Youth Soccer. I get the 6th graders coming into 7th grade and having to go from a smaller field to a bigger field. And so I try to set expectations right away so that they're not going to be upset. Like, for example, this fall, I coached 2 different 7th and 8th grade teams in Lincoln, one in Div 3, one in Div 2, and we did not win a game. And we had some games that was, really blown out, and it was difficult to struggle to keep the kids engaged the right way. We had a couple of yellow cards because kids got frustrated and they felt like they were being bullied. And we had to work with them off the field to help them set their expectations right. And, by the end of the season, everybody was playing and having fun and getting better. And so then in this spring, we'll try to get them positioned right where they should be based upon what we've seen in the fall. And hopefully they'll continue to develop.
I hope so. Good luck to you. It sounds like you have your work cut out for you, but it sounds like it could be challenging in a
Yeah,
positive way.
It'll be good. The kids will have fun and they'll develop. Lincoln's a very small town, and it's part of Lincoln Sudbury Regional High School. And I know our program works because they make up 15% of the student body, but they make up 40% of the soccer team.
Good. Well, hopefully we'll see you on the field and we'll see how it comes together. Thanks for that. Thanks for sharing.
You're welcome.
Jamie, anything that stands out from the rooms that you would want to share?
Yeah,
You can share.
a lot of people liked this comment. There are administrative issues that need to be addressed. The leagues need to look at teams which have an 8-0 record and giant goal differentials. Those teams need to move up or the problem will just repeat itself.
Mhm.
And
So that could
then,
be something that comes towards an administrative aspect of it, but it also sometimes comes with the coaches and where they're where they're telling the league their team should be. So again, it's one of those things that we all need to work together to make sure the kids, the children are being placed in the best division possible for them. So anything else?
Yeah, a lot of the time, the coaches take it a little bit harder than the players. The players tend to shake it off and move on to the next game.
And it is humbling for coaches, that's for sure. One more, anything else that stands out for you in that?
Yeah. Sorry, my chat just moved. For the losing side, they think that you should recommend a reset game plan and expectations for the rest of the game.
So that kind of goes on to and Ian, did you stop sharing your screen or just change of view?
Had a technological malfunction with the electricity in the house. I'm just going to pull my finger out of the socket as I'm watching this fabulous presentation.
So as we start thinking about the words that we had up on the slide was preventative actions, growth, challenging your players, developing and collaborating with other coaches, being that you are, in a sense, the boots on the ground as the coaches. So as for the coaches, use a chat box, or if you want to raise your hand and have a comment, which of those you think you can handle before the game, which might be some things you address during the game, and then what are some things you could take post-game as the coach to help make sure that you're getting the most out of it that you can with your players.
We do have someone raising their hand. They're under me as Jamie Balboni, but
All righty.
their real name.
Who has their hand up? Unmute yourself, please.
Hey, Tommy, it's Maureen LaRoche. I only
Maureen.
aspire to be Jamie Balboni, but we had a great conversation in our room about lopsided games, and just a comment that sometimes lopsided games are just something that happen, and it's not necessarily always the stronger team versus the weaker team, and the stronger team being on the advantage side of the lopsided game. Sometimes the stronger team just has a bad game, and they're the ones that are on the losing end of that particular type of circumstance. So as we develop players and, as we try to make our practices harder than the game itself, lopsided games should also be looked at as an opportunity to give our kids some type of a measurable improvement, a development improvement with the player actions, either attacking or defending, and maintain positive culture, because 9 times out of 10, they're going to revisit a lopsided game, whether they're the stronger team or the weaker team, somewhere down the road. And what a better way to educate kids and coaches and work together to make sure that kids still develop during those circumstances. So
Sure.
that's all.
That sometimes tends to be almost a buzzword that we talk about develop, but when do we take those steps to actually develop? Do we begin developing when the score is 5-0 and said, now I'm going to try to give my players some challenges? Or do we go from the beginning? Or, what are those preventative actions we could take to make sure, if your team is struggling, what are some preventative actions? Or if you have a really strong team, what are some preventative actions that you could take to make sure that your team is continuing to grow and learn and working towards an enjoyable experience during the game?
Yeah. There's so many intangibles that kids can work on during an instance like that. I know it's hard, but that's where the coach takes charge and really, makes that culture positive, and for positive outcome. When we take the scoreboard off of a game like that, we just work on other things.
So, and thank you, Maureen, and this is good because you're actually in this environment what can you do in the role you're in to get coaches to actually collaborate with one another, work together to make sure that maybe we don't wait till the game is 5-0 before we take some steps to try to make sure it's not going that way?
Well, I've actually had experience with this. So I coached in the league that I now manage. And so you like to think that in development and youth soccer, that two responsible adults can make decisions based on the best interest of the children playing the game. So usually when, a team is up right away, like 1-0, 2-0, and you can see how it's going to go. We either, get together with the coach and switch defenses or switch offensive players. And so we're really making it in the best interest of the children. What's going to be the best development opportunity for those players? And you have to take yourself as a coach, you have to take your ego out of it, and give up your players if you're on the winning team, and really think about why you're there on the sideline. Are you there for yourself, or are you there for those children? And you got to think about the car ride home, and you got to think about them coming back to practice, not only for your team, but the other team. So, but again, our league is developmental, no standings, no statistics, no championships. So we have the latitude to make those types of decisions week by week, season by season, and we do that. And there are reminders. So, I think it's just introspection of why you're there. And, you can definitely pull in the reins on either side and work together as responsible adults.
Sure, we hope so. Thanks,
Yeah.
Maureen.
You're welcome.
From both sides of it, from the administrative side of it and from the coaching side of it. Jamie, any other quick chats before we get into the next slide?
Yeah, one comment on that coaches need to be reminded that this is youth sports and we're all there for the kids. And then lopsided games turns the playing environment to be negative, which we as coaches shouldn't allow this to happen, as we can try to have the environment be fun and positive for the players.
Thank you for that. And thanks for everybody for sharing your ideas and your discussions from your rooms. The next slide, Ian. The next thing I'd like you to do, and hopefully nobody was sitting there thinking about, is there a magic wand that we could wave over everybody and make this all go away? No, there really isn't. But if we start addressing this as groups, as soccer leaders, and trying to deal with things both before the game happens, and for many of you, you might know that there's a team out there that you have that's a very strong team, or you might have a very weak team. So what are some steps that you could take? So if you could, use a chat box and take about 2 minutes and just type in 1 or 2 things that you might be able to take away from the discussions you had tonight, whether it's the presentation or what you had in your room with your peer coaches or peer groups, and just talk about some things that action steps that you might be able to use with your organization to maybe make it a better environment, or even some steps to help coaches deal with this when it does come, when it rears its ugly head.
One of the comments is doing what you can proactively to properly position players / team for success.
Mhm. And Rob, I'm going to throw another one out there for you. What if you can't? I think you and I have had some chats on being on both sides of the spectrum. What if you get in a situation and you just realize that, this is not what we actually signed up for, that we thought, but here's where we are.
Yeah, that's a tough one you have to coach through, unfortunately. But I think I was most taking away that the proactive nature of what you talked about here, where we can do things before the season starts to get things set up correctly. I think you coach through it, right? Whether it's the lopsided win or lopsided loss, You take your focus on the kids and keeping them safe and keeping them mentally in the game and having fun. And yeah, it's a tough dynamic.
It is. And again, it's not the most exciting place to be in because sometimes you run out of ideas on what to do, even if you're losing. Okay, what can I do to keep them excited about it? Meredith had an interesting comment. Meredith, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure, it goes along with what was it Maureen was saying earlier, which
Yep.
is, when you are on the losing end of a lopsided game, if you can refocus them, not so much on the score, but on let's work on this, let's work on that, let's give it our best to get 3 passes in a row or something. And then at the end, assuming they can do that, right? At the end, you've taught them how to persevere in difficult times. They take away from that not just I can pass with my left foot now, but I can actually make it through something that's difficult and pull something positive out of that. Which really, we're working with kids, right? We're trying to teach them life skills in addition to soccer skills. And I think it's a great thing for them to come away with. And so, learn to praise that kind of development as well.
Sure. And it's a interesting situation that we're in. Jeba, you had one that you were talking about, don't let them score if it gets to 4-0. Is there anything that you've been in that situation where you address it before it gets to 4-0?
Yeah, so I mean, where the game is going after, it's 1-0 or 2-0 even, right? So essentially, my team knows that they cannot have a more than 4 differential. So if the score gets 4-0, they are just not allowed to score. They reach the box, they hand the ball back to the other team, they come back and defend. So that's the expectation. They know that, and they try to manage that. And these are again like under 15 kids, so they know why they are doing that. But my question is like slightly different. I mean, do we all agree that is it the score that makes a game look very lopsided, or is the fact that they're just being played? Because the second part I don't know how to deal with that. The score I can deal with, but how do we deal with a completely lopsided game where the other team is not getting a chance to play?
Unfortunately, you can only control what you can control. But it also comes down to the collaboration part. Hopefully, coaches talk to one another in a friendly way before the game, during the game, after the game. When they start seeing this, the game happens to be going in that direction. And some coaches are wide open to those discussions, and some coaches not so much. So hopefully you find a coach that's open to discussion, and you discuss about, okay, what can the 2 of us do to make sure the players are enjoying this more?
I had an interesting challenge from the losing side this year, where my kids knew there was a 5-goal differential rule. So the very last game we played, it was 4-0, and they felt like they were getting outplayed, so they let themselves get scored on. So it was 5-0. And then they were just sort of going through the motions. And I said, guys, you still got to play this. So I went over to the other coach and I said, let's just report the score as 5-0, but don't tell your kids they can't score. Let's just go ahead and play it to however it plays. And it actually pulled my kids back into the game, trying to play and having more fun trying to play than just saying, well, we lost by 5, let's go home. And the other coach was hesitant at first. He goes, no, it's Bays, we'll get in trouble. I said, no, just report it as 5-0. I'll talk to the referee. But it's just important that you guys play, so you get to play all out, and my guys have to try to raise their game and stop just thinking 5 goals were done. And it worked. And the parents were happy with it too, on both sides.
Well, it's helpful that you had you and the other coach were willing to work together to handle the situation and deal with it. So I applaud you for that. But also the other coach for agreeing to say, all right, let's do this, and we'll make sure the kids are going to enjoy it, and we're going to enjoy it as a coaches the best we can. Ian has just typed a few things in the takeaways. Do you want to comment on that quickly before we go to questions?
I do not. It is merely food for thought.
So some takeaways that we could look at from when we get out on the field, and it's been brought up a few times about they are children, you know, and some of them refer to them as soccer players first, but they are children first. So thinking about that every step of the way. And then just think about what are some steps that you can do to make the game enjoyable for the people that are involved. So with that, because it is 8:32, so we ran 2 minutes over. If there are any questions, we'll be happy to stick around and answer any questions for anyone. Other than that, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Hopefully you are off to a good new year, getting your games in and on as scheduled. And hopefully this is not something that you have to deal with too often, but maybe your new ideas if it does come up in that direction.
I do
So-
want to know one more thing too, Tommy, before you
Yeah.
sign up.
Yep,
Next week, we do have week 2 of our coaching conversations on February 8th, again at 7:30. We'll have a speaker from the coaching manual, and they'll be discussing all about getting the most out of your game day. So be sure to register for next week if that is of interest to you.
thank you for that, Jamie. We have, how many weeks of the coaching conversation? Are there 8 weeks?
Yeah, throughout February, March, and possibly 2 weeks in April.
All righty, so hopefully we will see you all on a future call. And I am not in a rush to leave, so if you have any questions, feel free to either type them in or unmute yourself and ask. And if you do have to go to get back to your life at home, again, thank you so much for joining us. And I look forward to seeing you on a call in the near future.
Thank you, Tommy.
Thanks,
Tommy,
Tommy.
Tommy,
you.
and
Thank you, Tom.
one question, specific to
Thank you, Tommy.
goalkeepers, right? So how can you help a goalkeeper during a lopsided game, especially when the team is winning and there are no balls coming into this half?
Well, what do you currently try to do because it sounds like you're in that situation where you're on the plus side?
So my goalkeeper figured this out after the first game that, our team is a strong team. So he stopped playing. So he's a specialist goalkeeper. He actually tried out for ODP as a goalkeeper, but in TSL, he doesn't play goalkeeper. So he plays a different position, and that's how I'm using him currently. So I keep rotating my goalkeepers, so everyone plays one half. He does that, but he really wants to get better at goalkeeping, and he's looking for the opportunity to be challenged as a goalkeeper in this league. So is there anything that I can do? I mean, I saw Ian's suggestion about adding players on the other side or removing one of your players and making it more competitive. Sure, I will try that. But is there anything specific to a goalkeeper who is not getting a touch on the ball?
The only thing that popped in my head when you brought that up is making sure that the goalkeeper is actually actively involved in the game. So if the goalkeeper is willing to stand back on their line and not have any balls come to them, that's, as a coach, hopefully we could have them, okay, the game's in the other end of the field. What's your job now? What's your responsibility when the ball's 60 yards away from goal and nobody could score? Where's a good position for you to be? What's your role now when the team gets the ball? How can you help? So just hopefully keeping them active, but also helping them understand that they're trying to get a better understanding of the game, get a better feel for it.
Okay.
Hey, sorry, can I just chime in on that?
Sure.
This is Juan with Linear Soccer, and one of the things that we try to do with our goalies when we've been on the dominant side is instead of them standing on the line and just waiting, we try to tell them to move up and move down, just go with the flow of the game. If the team's up attacking, move up, so they still feel like they're part involved in the game. Maybe they're not getting the ball much at all because obviously they're the goalie, but they're still flowing with the ball. And because I've seen some coaches where their goalie just sits on the line, just waiting there, bored, doesn't even move. It's like if the player's more involved with how the play's going, I see that they're more active and they're more focused, more into the game instead of being bored, standing by the line.
Sure. So staying connected to the game is important for everybody on the field. It's a good point. I think the more you can get them involved, the better it is for the players, understanding their roles.
What about offering your goalkeeper up to the opposing team? How about that, Jebba? There's a step forward, isn't it? Hey, you guys aren't very good at stopping us, so let me put my keeper in. Go on, give it a try, Jabba. Give it a try.
Ian, that's an amazing suggestion. I will definitely try that one. Thank you.
Hi, Coach Tommy. Hi, Coach Ian.
Hello.
How you
Hello.
doing?
Yes, I'm Mohammed. If you remember me, I took the
From Quincy, Mass.
Yeah, yeah. How you doing, Coach?
Doing quite well. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you. I'm really enjoying this session today, and I think we had a very hard time with the lopsided games with my team. I'm coaching the U12 boys, as we learned from the D-Licensing course, that we should give the players the fun and positive environment so they can improve even on the games or even on the practice. So I'm using some techniques for dealing with that, even if we are on the losing side or the winning side. So like if we are losing on the losing side, after the game, I'm speaking with the players about the field side of the glass. Like we give the other team hard times in defending our goal and our area. And if we are facing this team again, they're gonna think about it when we face this team again, and they are thinking about that we are not a weak team, and if we lose as a team, and if we win as a team. So we are all together on this. And sometimes when we are winning, I'm just doing like some rules. Just we have to make like 5 accurate passes before we can score, or everybody has to touch the ball before we can score. Sometimes I switch the defenders with the strikers. So I'm trying to slow down the game and try to drop down the score. Sometimes also when we are losing, I'm just going to the other coach and tell him like, give my players some hope, like give them some space in our own half to build up, so they have like some fun on the game. Yeah, this is what I'm using right now in my team.
How does your team respond to it?
Yeah, they respond very well. And sometimes also I give like some challenging to the players, so I try to stay them focused on this challenging instead of focus on the score. Like I told everybody, you should make like 5 passes, 3 blocks of the ball, and 2 shots on the target. And every time I make this up, I ask the player, did you reach your goal or not? So they keep busy with their goals, not with the game score.
So using different measurables instead of just kicking it into the goal.
Yeah.
If the players are responding well, it makes sense.
Yeah. Sometimes they didn't, but most of the time they are responding well. And sometimes I put like some marks like from 1 to 5. If you reach your goal, just tell me from 1 to 5 how we assess your goal. Did you reach your goal or not, and what you're going to do in the next game? So this is what I'm trying with my players.
Well, good for you. Keep it up.
Yeah. And also,
have you thought about asking them what would be a challenge that they might want to try?
Yeah, maybe this is a good thing. Like why this happen? Maybe they know the answer.
So thanks for that, Mo, and good seeing you again.
Yeah,
hopefully me too. I'll see you over the next 8 weeks.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much.
You're very welcome. Thanks for joining in.
Okay.
Sorry, somebody else. There's one again, or somebody else was going to say something. I can be quiet if somebody else.
No, feel free. I think Dave has a question after that. So Juan, go first, and then Dave could go after that.
Last season, fall season, I coached 2 U14 teams. One that had more talent than the other. The second team, we run a intramural program in Lynn, and it goes to a certain age group. Up to U12, and then after U12 there's no more intramural, so a lot of those kids jumped into travel. So they're not very skilled players. So I took it upon myself to coach that team also. And I put them down in the lowest level county too. But I did give the expectation to the parents. Listen, they're learning for the first time as a travel level. They're getting, some of these players didn't get no coaching or training except for joining a game on a Sunday. So I gave them expectations, but as a coach, I knew there might be some blowouts in this. So I also put a system as far as playing, where like I put a sweeper, add an extra defensive player, just hoping that they could help out with not getting overrun by scoring. And surprised to say, they actually only lost one game all season. They played beyond my expectations, but I think also what it comes down to is, like, as a coach, communicating to the parents, letting them know that there might be blowouts, there might be on either way, either winning or losing, but also as a coach, how you position your players, learning your players, trying to get them in the position that would better benefit them and the team overall. I think that's also very important as a coaching aspect, not just go, oh, let's just throw 3 defenders, 4 defenders, 3 midfielders and 3 forwards and then get blown out. And then instead of trying to move around players.
I think you're right on the money, finding out what motivates your players, what's their driving force, what do they want to get better at, versus just, I'm going to have my checklist of things that I do regardless. So I think you're very much on to something there. Good. Dave, did you have a question or comment you wanted to share?
Sure. I'm with Beverly Youth Soccer, so I'll just take any team that they give me. I had a team last year in the fall, and we hit a situation where I have 12 kids on the roster, 12 much, okay, and I need 11 on the field. So in the best of situations, I have 1 substitute. So we hit a situation where we played a team and they showed up with 20 kids. Now, you can imagine a situation that puts you in, because it's tough to begin with. Most of my team effectively has no substitutes in the best of situations, but I have another team that substitutes the entire team out every time. So
sorry, these are your 2 teams?
U14.
Are they both? Sorry, did you say they're both your teams?
No. There's one of them was my team. One of them was another team I was playing. Okay.
So your team only had 1 sub, and
Yeah,
the other team had a platoon.
So when we showed up, and we knew we'd be annihilated, and we were annihilated not necessarily because we were technically any worse. We were technically a better team, but there's just that, the stamina issue. When you've got kids that age, and they just blew me away. Now I asked the coach. I asked the coach of the team if we could play 9v9, and he said, "Sure, it's okay, but it's gonna be difficult because I got so many substitutes." I'm like, "Okay." I asked the referee, and he said, "No, it's not my fault." Okay.
Well, and that's one of the things we talked about with the referees, of making sure that the integrity game is still there.
Referee said no.
9 versus 9 is still a legal game.
Yeah, but not
even at the 11 versus 11 age group.
Yeah.
So
that would
be something that they would have to deal with in a different light. But if both of the coaches said, "I'm only putting 9 people on the field," that's their choice.
I didn't have a choice in that. What do I mean in a situation like that? What do I do? I mean, is there any way to handle that situation?
Well, with the referee?
No, just, and let's assume the referee, I can't talk to her. As you know, you can't talk to the referee. So there's nothing.
But from a situation where you only have 11 players. Now, why did your team only have 11 players?
My team only had 14 players at the beginning of the season, and then something happened. One of them get injured. One kid wouldn't show up. So I'd have 12 players, period, pretty much every game.
Is there anything?
It wasn't too bad. It wasn't too bad.
Anything you could do from Beverly Soccer to make sure that you don't, your rosters are 15, 16, as opposed to 13, 14.
Right. I mean, that's hard once the season has started,
For sure.
Yeah.
But if you start off the season with 14, it's going to be, you're hoping everybody shows up every game. And unfortunately, the way kids are overbooked, it's definitely a challenge for them.
Yeah. But I'm just getting to the point that there's there's other reasons to think that games are lopsided. And, you know, there's a talent issues, right? The kids are the kids and that you get, but there are other administrative issues like that, which effectively will, you know, that team did extremely well in the league, of course, because they have so many kids. And they were no better than we were. They just happened to have the bodies, right? My team, when they saw that, was just they just, you know, realized that there's no way. So all we did is defend. That's all we could do.
I was coaching a team one time that decided to have a sleepover the night before a state cup game. And not one player went to bed before 3:30. Now, we didn't get blown out, but we did not play to the best of our ability. I'm like, okay, you didn't pick the best time to have a sleepover, but at the end of the day, there's not much we can do about that. You know, you do the best you can with what you're dealt with. I would suggest starting with Beverly and making sure that you suggest that they make sure that you do have 15, 16 kids on a roster, especially if you see a trend with different age groups, that becomes more of an issue. But I also applaud you for reaching out to the other coach and said, hey, let's make the most of this and see what we can do to get through the day, because that's the before, during, and after mentality. During the game, this is what we got. What can we do?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for doing this too.
Sure thing. Any other questions, comments?